Hello, everyone. This is Edo Ninja, and you are now listening to the Storm Connect podcast, published by the Sigil Arts Network. I talk about gaming topics and animated series of my own interests like RWBY, Final Fantasy, Persona 5 Royal, and etc. The goal I aim to accomplish on every episode is provide insights on these subjects that are usually overlooked to spread awareness and learn more. Remnants Rewind is a special segment of the show to where I specifically talk about Rooster Teeth's RWBY. And RWBY is a 3D animated web show consisting of 4 anime-esque girls, Ruby, Weiss, Blake, and Yang, and a few other traveler friends to train to become huntsmen and huntresses. However, they are now faced with a greater responsibility, which is putting their lives on the line to fight off against the creatures of Grimm and a formidable foe that will be mentioned in this episode. So if you have no knowledge of the RWBY series whatsoever, I recommend you check out the episodes at roosterteeth.com. That being said, let's rewind on RWBY Volume 8, Chapter 8. But I gotta ask this question first before I start this Chapter 8 review. But who let the Hound out?
Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out?
Sorry. I was given a certain type of suggestion to start out the podcast episode this way. So, yeah, here we are. But anywho. So, rewinding this episode here real quick, we begin off this chapters with the prisoners. Pretty much there was already an explosion there. Either if it was Raven or Cinder. It was obvious that it was Cinder, but at the very beginning, it looked like there was a bird there. It could have been Crow that transformed into a crow, which it looks like that was the case. But at the beginning, here, me looking like the clown, I was just hoping that was Raven. But if it was, like, I'm pretty sure it would have been very apparent at the end of the chapter, but it wasn't. So, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure that was just Crow, because he disappeared out of nowhere when he turned into that bird. So, but, oh my god, I was just really hoping that it was Raven. Like, honestly, like, I'm still on that Raven Watch 2021 for this volume, maybe. Like, if not, then hopefully the next volume, but definitely for this volume, especially that Ruby's message finally went across to it's all over Remnants now, so everybody knows that Atlas is under attack. But still, like, Raven is the only one who could pull this off. That would be nice. That would be wonderful. That would be great. But Jesus, oh god, I actually looked like a clown there because I was like, oh my god, Raven. But that didn't happen. It was Crow turning into a crow. So there's not much to really say about that, which I'll get a little bit more into that at the end of the chapter with 2 characters, Cinder and Watts. But now we talk about what went down at Ruby's team, all the way at the Shnee's mansion. So it looks like May Marigold, she did not stick around at the Shnee's mansion, and she decides to head down to the crater because she's really worried about what's happening down there, since there's like little to no support down there, especially the fact that they lost like considerable amount of members to help out with. So but at least, like, it was, like, a nice, small little conclusion after their debacle for a little bit, because she's just like, you know what, like, so much shit is happening, everything is just looking so horrible right now, she just looked very sympathetic about what's happening, instead of, like, she was kind of very frustrated in the past, like, chapter. So it makes sense, but I'm glad that she was able to, like, understand as to what's happening, because, like, at the end of the day, everyone's, like, doing at their best, and she even said herself, like, nobody knows what to do at this point, especially of, like, what's happening. Like, all they can do is what they can do now. But I'm glad it did not escalate to more divisions. It ended off just well and hoping for the best. So I continue to be a good fan of May, especially, like, with her frustrations. Like, I totally get where she's coming from, for sure. Now, on to the main event of this chapter. We do get to see a fresh change of Whitley's character after him being released from his father's clutches and no longer just being a mere shadow of his. And since he has control over the Schnee Dust Company, he pretty much now is acting differently. He's now helping out, which is, like, great and all, but, like, we get to see of, like, what he wants to do, or, like, what's he gonna do about this whole Grimm situation. I'm so funny. What I like about this, too, is the fact that, like, he seems excited to help. Like, he actually gets to do something, and it's merely out of his own will. So, at least, I like where this is going for Whitley's character. There's more that I have to say about with Whitley, but, like, before I could really dive a little bit more into that, I do have to bring Willow into this. But I'm just gonna keep going on as, like, as usual, I talk about as how the chapter happened in chronological order. So, putting Whitley aside for a moment, I'll bring him back up, of course. Let's talk about Ladybug. If you're not sure of what Ladybug is, it involves the characters of Ruby Rose and Blake Belladonna. So this was supposed to be like a touching, nice moment between with Ruby and Blake, because there's definitely like not enough interactions of those two characters specifically in the entire series. But I have a couple comments to make on that. So when Ruby was feeling pretty down about this whole situation, Blake pretty much cheers her up by saying like, you know, that's never stopped you from doing something. I've always been like that too when I was a little girl, but like things got in the way time after time, you know, stuff that took a toll on me, but you know, I didn't know if I could survive until I met you. But ever since the beginning, you've always inspired me and you still do. And I was just like, is that really true? Like, I actually took the time to like view some clips from volume 1 and 2 and maybe a little bit at the beginning of 3 as well. I don't know if it's because that they don't really talk that much to each other, but it just seems very strange that like of all things that they picked out for Blake's dialogue, it just goes like, oh yeah, well you've inspired me. It's like, it's just really hard to believe, especially like the fact that like things kind of were on a rough start. Not as bad between with Ruby and Weiss, but like, you know, Blake was kind of like, you know, don't get too close to me and stuff like that. She made questions things here and there, but like I've never seen anything to where Blake was just like, oh, wow, you know? It just seemed that she was so warped up about with her issues and such, and like, you know, again, the most interactions she's had among with the team is Yang, and, you know, arguably with Weiss as well. I like that they're now finally, like, giving more depth to pretty much the dynamic between the two. It's just, I feel like this was a really weird way to go about this, especially the fact of how little to no evidence that there is to the support of the Ladybug dynamic. But I personally believe that if Blake were to say something about how she felt when she was away from Team Ruby, pretty much after like the whole split happened after Volume 3, if she were to like think about like, fuck, like what would Ruby do in this situation, stuff like that, it's just like, you know what? My team leader did not do this and stuff like that. I should be doing the same thing for the Faunus, and we're gonna go save Haven Academy. I feel like if they took some type of example from that and tried to implement that type of dynamic, and especially the show of like, Blake was also thinking about with Ruby at the time being, and, you know, not just Yang, because, like, you know, there was, like, brief mention of Yang, but, you know, she only talks about, like, the team of how, like, she's loved them dearly, but, like, there's a little bit of brief moment of Yang when Sun spoke about her, nothing about with Weiss, and nothing about with Ruby. The way of how I would have put this together, like, just not for what I just mentioned earlier, but, like, the way of, like, implementing with the dynamic, I would have mentioned that instead of being inspired, I would say, like, Ruby gave her the drive to keep pushing forward. And especially as to, like, when she went back to Menagerie and after for everything that just, like, you know, started to, things that were about to tense back up, she was just like, oh, hell no. Even for Ruby Rose, she is a very, very flawed main character. I will say the one thing that's been, I guess you could say, pretty consistent is the fact that, like, she is showing some type of leadership, as it's kind of like just building on and of how to, like, rally things up together. I'd say that would be, like, the best way to say, like, oh yeah, this is how I got my drive from you. Though I do agree that, like, it is strange because, like, Ruby was just kind of, like, just a kid back then. But I would have said that, like, as time went on, as they start to grow as a team, things have changed. I definitely would have said that altogether just that way. The concept idea of the dynamic is not bad. It's just the execution of it, I believe it was just very odd to me. But I will appreciate the fact that, like, they are now adding more depth into that dynamic. So we can appreciate that, and I would hope that it goes more to a direction in the future. Other than that, Blake still seems to be a very lively character in this volume, and I'm liking that. She did not have that in volume 7 and somewhat at 6 until towards the end. Later on in the chapter, Penny seems to have awakened, and she is still struggling against with the virus chip that Watts implemented onto one of her swords. And I guess there was a Penny and Nora moment, which I actually was hoping for that. Like, I actually said this many years ago, all the way in 2014, that I hope that there was gonna be a moment between those two, and I didn't think it would actually happen, and I love it. Nora, a character into the RWBY series where she's having, like, an identity crisis without Ren, and she wasn't that much of a character to begin with. And you have Penny, who grew into a character from a robot to an actual, like, what a human girl would say, like, oh my god, that development. But anyways, the fact that, like, you know, and even with her becoming the Winter Maiden, like, with everything, I feel like this was well executed between the two. And it's really nice, especially, like, of how those two are trying to keep in line as to their true selves. One that is doing soul searching, the other one that happened to grow a personality, feelings, and who is also the Winter Maiden, also became part of a bigger picture, and now she really wished that she didn't. I don't think we're gonna get those type of dynamics again between the two characters, but I'm hoping that they do. I doubt it, but I want more moments with Penny and Nora. I feel like it's a great dynamic and underrated. And I'm hoping at least by the end of this volume, or like maybe to the next volume, depending on how this story goes, I just hope that they have great results of their character developments, and I just hope they don't regress or like nothing just happens at all. I really hope something good happens between the two. But according to the opening, we might not get a happy ending in this volume. Anyways, I guess we can fast forward a little bit now. Let's talk about Willow. Willow, and I guess now with a little bit of back to Whitley. Now that we're seeing more of Willow's character, like, since it was like the tease of it in Volume 7, and now we see more of her in Volume 8, she's definitely exactly what I expected. And so far, I'm not disappointed. I really liked Willow in this chapter. Someone that is a broken mom, and she's overwhelmed by, like, pretty much the horror as to what's happening in this chapter, and how, like, she tries her best to get it together, either by struggling to drink or to, like, watch out for her family. I really like that. I hope this would not be the last that we definitely see of Willow. I'm just hoping that doesn't mean that she has the, well, there's a certain haircut that they always do with mother characters in anime, and unfortunately she exhibits the yeah, I'm that mom that's gonna die in the series haircut. So I mean, I could be wrong, I definitely could be wrong, but like, oh god, I would hate for this to happen, that they just finally showed off of who she is and such, and like, you know, we're getting this character death of her in this volume, all for her to die in this volume. I hope that does not happen, or at least at all in this volume. I definitely think that Willow should not die at all in the RWBY series. But if that happens, oh, I'm not gonna lie, I will not be ready to have that conversation. What I noticed about this chapter as well, that like Whitley seems to have a little bit of distaste towards to his mom, which I'm just like, dude, like I get it, because like she didn't really step up to be a mom and such, and she was kind of powerless, that she just kind of accepted her fate. At least that's the type of character that she pretty much gave off the impression of based on her dialogue and her actions and such. But it's just like, dude, come on, like, if anything, you should be having a distaste towards your father. Like, your father was on some shit. Like, Willow, she's human, and as much as that, like, she kind of just like did not do the best as a parent. Come on. The least you can do is respect her, at least a little bit more than how you'd respect with Weiss. I mean, like, now the relationship just kind of grew, but oh my god, come on. I just think that's shitty. But like I said, I'll take Whitley's character development, but I'm just like, dude, cut back the slack on your mom. Shit. I mean, like, dude, she also used her summoning, her fucking summons, her glyphs to fucking save you. Come on. It would have been cool if Willow was actually a fighter as to how she grew up. That would have been really interesting. And that could be true. I don't know if they're actually to go a little bit more in depth about it, but hey, I am now a little bit interested in Willow's character now that like they kind of just showed up as to how she is now, and just showcasing that she could also use her summonings. I definitely want to learn more about her. And I think it's good that they showed this, because it's just like let's say that she's not a fighter, at least she has something that she could also defend herself with. So, oh yeah, no, that bitch definitely has her aura unlocked. But anywho, proceeding on forward. I just want to mention this real quick, that this Grim Hound has been killing me ever since that it's been showcased at the very beginning of this fucking volume. Like, that bitch has been going like, wolf, motherfucker. I don't know. I just think it's just so funny. Like, even though, like, it's supposed to be, like, horror, and they do a very good job of the horror aspects of Ruby, and they definitely have kept up to that consistency in this volume so far. But just for some reason, this fucking Hound, like, it's just so fucking funny. This Hound is the reason why this chapter was a cute horror episode. I know that's, like, really strange to say, but, like, it is one of Salem's pet, and, like, he does act like a dog, so it's just so fucking funny to me as to, like, how, like, it acts like a dog, like, sniffing around the place. And what I find interesting as well, like, even though the Grim saw, like, the green light, he didn't go through the fucking, the windows of where the light was coming from. He just went through the fucking front door. Well, window, I guess you could say. But bitch starts sniffing around, just starts walking around. Instead of just rushing up to the fucking stairs, he's just like, let me sniff around this fucking place. I'ma find it. Let me guess where she's at, like, in a fair way. They didn't have to do that, but they definitely did that just to add a little bit more of, like, the creative episode of this, and it was very funny. I gotta give that to Kirby for that one. That being said, I didn't talk about this earlier. I actually saved it just to talk about it at this part, because I had to talk about it overall in this chapter so far. But I'm extremely bothered by the fighting choreography of this volume so far. Like, let me talk about with a segment between Blake and Ruby when they were fighting off that Grim. Blake, she usually does not charge into fights like that. She's, like, much more of, like, a clever type of sneaky type of fighter. And the way of just how she was, like, it's just so different. Like, even more different than, like, the recent volumes of Volume 4 and 5. And 6, actually. More of 5 and 6, actually, now that I think about that. Yeah. She had some type of, like, ninja, like, aesthetic towards to, like, her fighting style. And it's just, like, all she's doing is just shooting and then just charging in. Then after that, she just gets her ass beat. Like, what in the hell was that? Like, that was not even much of a fight. That was just her getting thrown around. Like, even though it's cool to see that they're using, like, dust to infuse into her semblance, her shadows, like, all over against the Grim, like, it didn't even do much. It barely did shit, actually. She usually fights a lot smarter than that. Like, even though, like, let's say, for example, if she did approach on and there was not, like, actual, like, good approach options, like, you know, I'm not saying that she can't struggle in a fight, though, but it's just, like, that's all that she did. She just kept charging in. She just kept getting thrown around. Like, that is so not Blake's fighting style. I realize there's not much comment that I could really say with Ruby except with her just using the silver eyes, but because of that, there was, like, not much of that. I'm just gonna skip over that because it's not really much of a buzz to really talk about. But the way that Blake was struggling, like, did they really insert this moment just for, like, to have another of those, like, oh yeah, like, you're the main protagonist, like, we need you speech? It's just like, no, you definitely could take on against this Grim. Like, I'm not saying that, like, you can easily win this fight, though, but I'm just like, really? Like, you're saying this of all times now? Wait until you get into the boss fight, until you fight Cinder or something, because that's actually gonna happen, probably. But anyways. And Weiss? Don't get me started about with Weiss. Weiss has speed, she has time dilation, she has all these things, and, like, the most that she uses are her icebergs and her summonings. Which is cool, I guess, but, like, that's it? Like, what about the other, like, abilities that she was able to use from the beginning? Like, what happened to that? She usually fights much more better than that. I miss when she was able to use her glyphs and, like, literally, like, go zoom around her opponents, Grim, human, anything, and literally just do, like, great attacks just for a chance for an opening. She could have done that in this chapter, but that did not happen. It just was just so slow. The fighting choreography overall has just been so slow. Like, Whoa, what happened? I'm just pretty astonished in this chapter, mostly about the fighting choreography. I knew there was going to be a shift change after for volume 3, of course, but this was probably the worst fights of Ruby, or at least one of the most worst fights against with Gray or Human, whatever. It's just, I was not impressed at all. The problem I have with this is the fact that we've seen them do at least some decent fights, especially in the previous volume, in volume 7. We've seen them do decent fights, and just this, we know y'all could do better. I'm sorry, but this, I did not like this execution one bit. And now that I'm seeing that, I don't know if it's because of it's the effect of the pandemic. It could be, but I am very alarmed as to how their fighting style choreography goes on in the future, because that was an extreme definition of yikes. They talk about how the cast has pretty much improved, but because they improved, they're also falling so short on these abilities that actually were very helpful, and as to how they were previously into the series, and just here we are now. It's please, I really do not want to see this go down into a playground style of fighting. The last time that I've been that disappointed into a fighting choreography, or how well a scene was done in someone in that similar matter, was in Kingdom Hearts 3. If you don't know anything about the lore of Kingdom Hearts 3, and you're still kind of just playing it, if you're not at the end game part of the game, skip this podcast episode for about maybe a couple minutes. Yeah, because I'm gonna try my best not to go too much about this. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so so when the Keyblade wielders, the Guardians of Lights, when they confronted against with Terranor, that he just starts bodying everybody, they all just stood there and stuff like that. It's just y'all have trained so much for these abilities and such, and for what y'all can do, and none of you guys are doing anything about it. And some of you are just wobbling your Keyblade around that's gonna do something. No, what? Did y'all forget how to be Keyblade wielders for a moment? That's exactly how I feel about this chapter. And did y'all forget how to be huntsmen and huntresses for that moment? I'm now that alarmed for the quality. I was so far into this volume, how things have been done, the most that I've been a fan of so far, and at least to one that makes sense, is Penny versus Cinder. But that's it. That's literally all that we got here right now. There are more fights that I definitely would like to talk about, even that ones that are not in this chapter. But I'm just gonna save that for my Ruby Volume 8 review, when this volume is over. But because that I saw this chapter, I had to get that out of my chest, because I'm now very worried as to how we're gonna see the rest of the chapters. And I really hope this does not let me down, because oh my goodness, we're already in mid-season and such, and the fact that that was the first thing that we come back to after for that little bit of a longer hiatus than usual. What happened? Oh my god. But that's all that I can really say about that. That's all I really want to talk about, the fighting choreography. I just had to stop myself. I was about to go more about it, but gonna say that for the volume review. So expect more comments about that in the future, because you definitely would not. This is definitely not the last time you're gonna hear anything about this. So sorry. Let's move forward, everybody, shall we? So later, Penny, she is now being utilized by that virus chip, and the motive is to open the vault, and after that to self-terminate. So now that we heard that last part, I really am curious as to how the rest of this volume is gonna go, because the Hound is defeated, obviously, spoilers, but the fact that, okay, well, I had the Winter Maiden powers, and I gotta open the vault, but now I gotta self-terminate, when, you can't just use it as a puppet of your own? I've been gassing that theory up for, the entire volume, but I guess this has been debunked. I mean, it could change. That obviously could change in the future, but now that we know that's a mission that she has to do, step 1 and step 2, it's wow, It would be really funny if you have control over her and stuff like that, and like that's how you're gonna end it off as, especially the fact that she's the Winter Maiden now. Oh my. But of course, it might not pave that way because now Cinder is gonna be the one to go find Penny, and there's definitely gonna be a fight for sure. As to how the outcome is gonna transpire, that's yet to be seen, but some of the theories that I mentioned earlier in my podcast episodes, they're still not out of question yet, but now we're kind of just dumbing down the list and seeing of like what's possible now. So definitely like Cinder and Penny and Ruby, Weiss, Blake, and maybe Nora, like things happening at the Schnee's mansion is definitely gonna go down that way, or at least somewhere close to that. There's gonna be some type of confrontation, of course. So I am really looking forward to that, with Ruby finally having the run back with Cinder, definitely with Weiss. I'm definitely looking forward to that, and I'm actually hoping that they do fight off with Cinder, and they probably have to focus off against with Penny because she might be controlled to fight as well, but who knows? Other than that, the only thing I really have left to mention about this chapter is the human Grimm hybrid theory. That's a popular theory that's been going around within the community, and now it's true. Looks like Salem can actually use dead people as Grimm slaves, and that's terrifying. We're not exactly sure as to how it works, but like we pretty much got like the concept idea that that is possible, and it's disgustingly well done. But that being said, no body, no death. Summer Rose Grimm, that's about to happen. Like, we definitely have not seen, like, we don't know if Summer Rose is actually dead or not. So, the chances of seeing that is so high into the series. Maybe not for this volume, but, like, I would not be surprised if we actually see that. Like, they only been hyping this up, like, oh yeah, Summer is dead or whatever because she never came back from a mission, but, like, we never seen if she's actually dead. So, she's either alive or, well, another experiment of Salem, and that's just scary. I also think that, like, Salem has the strict order as to not kill Ruby Rose. So I feel like with the connection of that, and basically that her mom is, could actually probably be alive or another experiment, I feel like something is gonna have that type of tie in, and we might see that reason into that series. I feel like those two are connected into that. Because it's like, there's no real good reason to keep Ruby alive, unless that she also wants to use Ruby as an experiment. Maybe that's how it could work. Because, like, Silver-Eyed Warriors, I would assume that Salem would want to get rid of as many of them as possible. But if she has another way of going around about it, I feel like this could be another well tie-in as to of her creations, of her very well descriptive, disgusting creations of Grimm. Yeah, And fuck, we might even see a Grimm Adam Taurus. That's actually really terrifying to think about as well. I doubt we'd see Grimm Pira Nikos, because like her body literally turned into dust, so there's not even a single trace of her. Unless there is an explanation that comes in for that later, I definitely do not see that being a possibility at all. Regardless, we are now seeing like new peaks of Salem's power, and oh god, it just gets terrifying as we grow closer to every end of the volume, because it usually ends up that way. Like, at the beginning, it's like, okay, this is what we're reviewing. This is pretty much the plot. This is what we got to do. All the way to how it progresses as to, yeah, Salem's that terrifying. Salem's that terrifying. And they actually do a very well done job of that. And it's kind of unique, too. Like, it doesn't feel like, a little bit of a rinse and repeat off of, like, other inspirations. It feels fresh, and I like that. I just hope that they're able to, like, tap into that potential peak when they actually face off against Salem, like, personally. And also, the reason why I bring up, about the connection with the whole Silver-Eyed, well, here's the thing. That Grimm Hound, we got to see its identity, since now we understand where the human intelligence is coming from. It was a Faunus, and he also had a silver eye. And it's like, whoa, that's how you know that Salem truly does not like fucking silver-eyed warriors. And potentially also Faunus as well, because wow, she really did that Faunus silver-eyed warrior dirty like that. That was so foul. And I definitely do not doubt that we're going to be seeing more of these into the future. And oh god, I might have a hard time watching this because like, it was just so creepy and gross. It's like, oh god. And like the fact that like when it actually like started fading away, like the only thing that you see left of it is the skeleton. It's like, what the fuck? This is so fucked. Cool, but kind of gross and creepy. Other than that, there's not really much else I have to say about this chapter, except for, like, maybe Cinder manhandling Watts. Like, she picks him up and just like, oh, yeah, I'm now important of this volume. Just, like, literally picks him up. I just feel like Watts is just so used to being thrown around like this. Like, he got his ass bodied in the last volume, and here he is, like, he keeps getting bodied, and now, like, he's just a toy. A fucking tall boy toy. It's kind of funny, but sad at the same time. Y'all gotta give the genius a break. Holy shit. Now, like, what are my exact thoughts on this chapter overall? Well, if I have to break it to you like this, it left me conflicted. Because in this chapter, there are many, let's put it this way, okay? There are many high levels of this chapter, and there are many low levels of this chapter. There are many good things that they definitely did execute very well on, but because that they do a good job on that, I feel like they forget some other aspects of to what makes RWBY great, and they're definitely like falling very short on that. And the fact that it was screaming into that in my face in this chapter, I'm very alarmed as to how this series is going to progress. More so, I'd say, with this volume. Like I said, I want to give the benefit of the doubt because of this pandemic, but to be fair, they've already had this written down before Volume 7 ended, to my knowledge, at least around that time frame. But even then, the execution of this, I don't know. I'm gonna keep going with the flow and see what happens, but I'm now starting to have that little bit of the red alert feeling for where the series is going in terms of their execution and their production, or post-production, all of that, essentially. But I'm going to remain and keep an open mind. But I just hope this is the last time that I have felt this conflicted on a chapter. But other than that, that is all going to be for the podcast episode. If you're listening to this show on Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave out a 5-star rating if you enjoyed this podcast. Hit up the Storm Connect Twitter at StormConnectEN or other platforms this podcast is on for feedback on the show. I definitely would love to hear your guys' thoughts on today's Remnants Rewind episode. That being said as well, before I actually sign off, I just want to give a bit of a quick thank you to my new followers. I pretty much have posted some of my RWBY designs. I definitely have posted them on Twitter like over the years, but like since the official RWBY Twitter account, they asked for fan art, especially to celebrate with 100 episodes and such. I'm no artist, but like since I do visual designs and such for like, you know, static and for motion editing, I do all those. So I posted that onto the into their mentions, and it just blew up, and I just happened to have a surge of new followers and such. So if you are new to my podcast and new to my community and stuff for what I do, thank you so much for taking interest. I truly, truly value that from the bottom of my heart. I love talking about this series as much as most of the other RWBY creators, viewers, anyone that's like interested into RWBY. I love talking about this series so much. And I'm just glad that I'm just now gaining much more of an audience for that. And I just want to thank you guys so much for taking that interest and such. And I hope to see you guys more around to make your comments about what I really have to say about this and how passionate I really am for this series, regardless of how good or bad it may be. But it gave me some type of good value drive to want to create content for this series, you know? I've been trying to make RWBY content for so long, but I just never got a good footing around to it up until Volume 7. So I'm still kind of new to this somewhat, but I'm kind of just playing catch up to like for, you know, lost time. But I've been watching RWBY since like Volume 2 dropped. But I also hope that you guys take into interest in my other forms of content like Persona 5 Royal, soon Devil May Cry 5. I'm actually going to introduce that here onto basically as to what I'm doing now and stuff like that in Storm Connect, so look forward for that into the future. And yeah, there's a lot that I could really say, but like you could tick around my social media and such to see of like what else that I do and such though, especially if you found me through Ruby. So once again, thank you guys so much. If you're new here and stuff like that, I appreciate you, and I hope that you're willing to stick around for this ride. And well, we talk about Ruby and Remnant Rewind. This is Zeto Ninja. Thank you for tuning in to Storm Connect's Remnant Rewind episode today. Stay safe, healthy, and for heaven's sake, stay smart. I'll see you guys next time. See ya!